James Harris never thought he'd have to fight for the right to be heard. A white judge, dismissive and cruel, tried to crush him at every turn. But when his case becomes pivotal for a top law firm, he's forced to confront a brutal truth. Biases run deeper than he imagined. What happens next will shock even the most seasoned. Let's start from the beginning. James Harris stood tall in the courtroom, fresh out of law school with honors, his heart brimming with dreams of becoming a prominent advocate for justice. The case before him was his first major challenge, a crucial moment to prove himself. The judge overseeing the trial, Judge David Mitchell, was a seasoned white man known for his strictness. However, as the trial progressed, James began to sense something far more insidious. Mitchell, who carried an air of superiority, began dismissing James's arguments with subtle condescension, mocking his points with sarcasm. His facial expressions conveyed nothing but disdain. Every attempt James made to speak up was met with cold interruptions and belittling comments. It quickly became apparent that Mitchell's harshness wasn't just because of the case. It was personal. As the hours dragged on, James felt the weight of an uncomfortable truth settling in. To Judge Mitchell, justice seemed to only apply to the right people. His every move was scrutinized and dismissed, simply because he was black. The legal system, which James had always believed was a beacon of fairness, felt like an insurmountable wall he could never break through. This trial, which was supposed to launch his career, quickly turned into a battle against both a biased judge and a system that seemed intent on keeping him in his place. That evening, James returned home, his spirit crushed. His family, always his unwavering support, could see the defeat in his eyes. They tried to comfort him, offering words of encouragement, but deep inside, James couldn't shake the feeling that the world wasn't ready for him. It was as if his mere presence in that courtroom had shaken the foundation of something far deeper than the trial itself. But rather than succumb to despair, James made a vow to himself. He would not back down. No matter how many obstacles lay ahead, he would keep fighting, for justice, for himself, and for the future he deserved. A few weeks after his crushing defeat in Mitchell's courtroom, James found himself facing the judge once again. This time, the case involved racial discrimination within the local police force, an issue close to James's heart. Judge Mitchell, never one to hide his disdain, gave James a knowing smirk when he assigned him as the lead attorney. It was as if he were silently saying, "Let's see if you can handle this." But James was different this time. The sting of his previous humiliation had hardened him, and he was determined to prove himself. He dove into the case with unrelenting focus, meticulously collecting evidence of the systemic racism embedded within the police force. Late nights were spent combing through documents, interviewing witnesses, and piecing together a case that was undeniable. The deeper James dug, the clearer it became that the discrimination within the department was not an isolated incident, but a deeply entrenched part of its culture. James knew this was his moment, his chance to show Mitchell and everyone else that he was more than capable. When the trial began, James's presence in the courtroom was nothing short of commanding. He presented his arguments with unmatched precision, each point carefully crafted, each piece of evidence irrefutable. Mitchell, despite his initial skepticism, couldn't help but listen, his arrogant smirk replaced by a look of grudging respect. For the first time, the judge had no choice but to acknowledge James's brilliance. The case ended with a decisive victory. James's win made headlines, and the media quickly took notice. His name was now synonymous with success and competence. High-profile clients sought him out, eager to have him represent them. He was finally getting the recognition he had worked so hard for. But even as his reputation soared, the discrimination in Mitchell's courtroom didn't dissipate. If anything, it grew worse. Mitchell's attitude became increasingly dismissive, as if James's success threatened something deep within him. The old judge treated him as though he were still that inexperienced young lawyer, undeserving of the accolades he had rightfully earned. The bitterness in Mitchell's gaze only fueled James's determination to prove him wrong once and for all. After yet another courtroom victory, where James's brilliance and dedication were on full display, a major opportunity came his way. One of the city's top law firms, impressed by his unwavering success, offered him a position. It was the kind of opportunity most young lawyers could only dream of. However, there was a catch. The firm wanted James to work directly under Judge Mitchell, who had recently been promoted to a high-ranking role within the company. The irony was nearly too much for James to bear. He would now be working for the very man who had once belittled him at every turn. For James, the offer was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it was the recognition he had worked so hard for, a clear sign that he had earned his place among the city's legal elite. But on the other hand, it meant he would be tied to the man who had never once given him a fair shot. It felt like a reminder that, despite all his accomplishments, Mitchell still had the power to decide his future. James walked into the firm with a mix of pride and frustration. The tension was palpable. Mitchell, now elevated to a position of authority, still carried that same air of condescension, his dismissive attitude no less sharp than before. He would interrupt James in meetings, belittle his suggestions, and pass judgment on his decisions with a casual arrogance. But James wasn't about to back down. He had earned this position, and he would prove it. He threw himself into his work, handling complex cases with the same precision and skill that had gotten him this far. Slowly but surely, the firm began to rely on him more and more. His ability to win cases, often against the odds, became the driving force behind the firm's success. Yet, despite the undeniable impact James was having, Mitchell remained stubborn, unable to see past his own pride to acknowledge James's worth. Each day, the resentment simmered, but James remained determined. He would not let Mitchell's blind arrogance define him. As James settles into his role at the firm, he continues to excel, bringing in high-profile clients and winning cases that elevate the firm's status. Mitchell, at first resistant, begins to notice how critical James has become to the firm's success. Slowly, Mitchell starts to change. He can no longer deny James's brilliance, and over time, his resentment turns into grudging respect. In a surprising turn of events, Mitchell offers James the opportunity to head the firm's legal department, realizing that his own biases have been holding him back. This offer becomes the culmination of James's journey, not just as a lawyer, but as someone who has fought against the system that tried to suppress him. His victory is both personal and professional, and it signals a shift in the firm's dynamics. In the final moments of the story, James, standing in his new office with a view of the city, reflects on his journey. The road ahead is still challenging, but now he has the power to change things. The system of bias and discrimination is far from gone, but James has earned his place, and he's determined to continue the fight for justice. The story ends with James knowing that this is just the beginning of his journey to reshape the legal world around him.